sources of proteins. Anybody? Meats, fish, chicken, poultry, beef, game, wild game. What about nuts, seeds? We can get some proteins from some grains. I'm going to start out class today with a little bit of some science. I'll show you the second half a little bit later. It's more of entertainment, kind of dorkiness if you're a foodie. Basically, how many of you ever heard of the term meat glue? Transglutaminase. So Mr. Greg here is going to talk about some science. I'm going to skip through some of this video. Just kind of hitting the top points of what we're getting into, building some foundation, but check this guy out. It's not very funny, not near as funny as I am, but bear with me.
In the faces of that I'm used to looking out to. So it's really great to see all of you looking very happy. I don't see any fear at all. I think you're looking forward and saying, holy mackerel, Greg looks kind of scared. I haven't given a lecture to the general public for 10 years or so it's really, really a privilege. The last one that I gave was here in the Science Center. I should tell you, since the head of the Charles was this past weekend, I have a particularly fond memory of this classroom, and it was the last class of organic chemistry before the head of the Charles Regatta, and I was up here talking about some esoteric subjects. Are obviously a major source of nutrition. Humans, over the course of evolution, have lost the ability to make 8 out of the 20.
That's wrong. There are 20 amino acids,
Synthesized,
but it's 9.
Simple precursors, 12 of the 20 amino acids, and that means that we have to get the other 8 amino acids either
9.
from the breakdown of proteins in your stomach by acidic digestion in your stomach, or by bacteria that reside in your digestive tract. It turns out that the bacteria that reside in your digestive tract are really master constructionists of all kinds of things, and they're able to supply us with the amino acids by synthesizing them from simple precursors. Shown on this slide are a series of different proteins that are of relevance to food, and I'll go through several of these and give you some idea of why they're of interest. What proteins are doing for the most part in biology is they're the real workhorses. They're the doers. They're the constructionists. They make stuff. They're also the building blocks of many cellular components. If you look at muscle, most of muscle is protein, and that protein is doing stuff. It's contracting. It's moving. Proteins are the things in the cell that do what's called signaling. So if something happens on the outside of the cell and the inside of the cell needs to know that it's happening on the outside, it's proteins that are transmitting all of that information. So they're the information carriers. So they serve a really important role in biology. With respect to food, this protein is called hemoglobin. And it has a red color because it has an iron center in it. It has each hemoglobin protein has a single atom of the metal iron, and that iron
Easiest form of iron for our body to absorb.
And of course, this is an
heme form of iron that he's talking about
so
now.
in highly oxygenated tissues like the brain, tissues like muscle, that are consuming a lot of oxygen in order to do work. These have a lot of blood supply and therefore have a lot of hemoglobin, and it's for that reason that they're red. Also shown here is casein. The purpose of milk in mammals is to emulsify nutrients, primarily fat, but also proteins as well. And the problem with fat is that it doesn't dissolve in water. So there'd be no way for a mother to transfer nutrients to her offspring without emulsifying the nutrient fat, which is obviously a high-calorie nutrient. And it's casein that does this emulsification. Albumin is a constituent. It's actually the most predominant protein in our bloodstream, where it's used to carry fats and carry other molecules, and in eggs as well, albumin is the major constituent of the whites, where again it's used to as a storage depot for nutrients. And renin, as you'll
He goes on to talk about different kinds of chains, amino acids, and how they connect. The next thing that he talks about is how do we change, what is the most common type of, how am I going to ask this question?
plenty of amino acids.
When we talk about proteins, what's the common way to denature the proteins? Denature meaning breaking down or change.
Says heat.
Heat, yeah, cooking, very good. Adrian, yeah, I don't know how I was going to ask it. I'm not very good at asking questions sometimes, but yes. Heat is the most common. He talks about several of those here in just a second.
It's just as I mentioned, they can fold, they can also unfold. And protein unfolding is extremely interesting and is used by cooks to do all kinds of phenomenal acrobatic feats. So some of the things that can this is called denaturing when you unfold the protein.
It doesn't mean you put Tide Pods on your chicken
If you
breast,
shock
okay,
it with
detergents,
acid or base,
but
for
they can
example,
help break down,
protein, if
can
you
help break
shear
down
it using
proteins.
mechanical shear forces
That was
that
my-
tend to
that was a
pull on
joke.
the ends of the molecule, you can rip it apart
Sorry, offended
by
that.
shear forces.
How did
Bubbles
you know?
create surface tension, that when the proteins sit on the edge of this, the surface tension of the bubble can pull a protein apart. Detergents. Remember I mentioned that the inside of a protein has all these hydrophobic residues clustering together, and when you treat a protein with detergent, it insinuates into the interior of the protein and binds all of those hydrophobic things and blows up the protein, basically. And then salts and
That would be kinda
maybe
interesting to watch,
most
though.
familiar to all of you is heat, using cooking, the temperature of thermal denaturation.
Then you got, here it just kind of shows you, so this is a compilation of a protein molecule and heat being applied to it. Kind of gives you an idea of
Add heat to it.
what happens as you heat it up.
There it
It
is.
starts to change
It started
in
as
different.
this very regular coiled shape, and now it's gone. And the other important thing is,
The other thing, so, and then they show another one where they start to use,
one of these types of molecules has this brace built into it that prevents it from unraveling.
this right here,
And
so they're using this,
next year,
for
two
cancer.
of these molecules on the left-hand side will be going into testing in cancer patients as a next.
so watch what happens when they
Cancer therapeutic.
apply, I don't know who came up with this great music, but kind of gives you an idea of how structurally sound that is, even though it's going through some type of denaturing process.
If you look on the right,
And then Chef Wiley kind of he's a little bit funnier. He owns a restaurant in New York, and they were using meat glue, transglutaminase, and he's talking about it. And they put this glue, that's them mixing it, and they put it on uneven cuts of meat.
Temperature or time temperature.
Okay, so watch what happens when they coat the surface with the transglutaminase, and they wrap it up, and they like to give it 24 hours. That he said in the video they could do it
You see there what he's done.
in like
is
30
he's
minutes.
Taken it, applied
But that was 2 pieces originally.
and wrapped it up, and we've let it sit overnight. Again, overnight is ideal. 4 to 6 hours is
Now you get it
although
a more even cook. Proportions are a lot more consistent. Reduces food waste, which is a big deal in restaurants. They've actually even gone as far as putting it on radishes. Okay, so they're doing a little bit different technique there, but they put it on radishes to make,
I brought some of it. So
it's a garnish. Well, I guess you could eat it,
So that.
but if you're a
That's,
foodie,
again, that's pretty neat.
and plate presentation's important, I think that's kinda neat.
There you can see, we've cut it up thinly, and so that.
but let's talk about transglutaminase and where we can find it. Where do you think we find those foods at? chicken nuggets. You think they cut little nuggets off of a chicken, make those out of it? It's all ground meat. They use foods like that to help keep them together. Sausages.
You know what souse is?
Say that again.
Do you know what souse is?
Souse
Yeah.
or sous vide. You talking about the technique to cook food?
No, it's a type of meat. It's just like they put a bunch of random parts together and make like meat, and it like comes in like bologna strips almost, but like it's square.
Huh? Like a pickle loaf kind of thing?
Yes. That's what my grandma used to just silly.
Yeah. No, you can keep that. I will not be asking. I will not be trading for your lunch today.
No, that ain't good. Trust me.
But it's been used for quite some time. Meat and poultry products, they talk about using it. It's improved textures, imitation crab, sausages, smaller cuts of meat, putting them together for larger cuts of meat. Okay, so it happens. If it kind of weirded you out before that they were able to do that, it's in the foods we eat. It just helps reduce waste, helps create uniformity. Like I said, chicken nuggets, any fish sticks, those kinds of things. They piece those things together so that they can have more higher yield in production. So, does it make you not want to eat chicken nuggets anymore?
No, I still love them.
I know, it's hard, right? Can't deny it. Still gonna eat them. All right, proteins. We don't have to get them just from animals, okay? Since ancient times, many people have believed that eating animal foods, particularly meat, was necessary for good health and optimal physical performance. Probably because that was the most consistent source of food that we had year-round as hunters and gatherers. Many Americans think a meal is not adequate unless it contains large portions of meat. Sound familiar? What's the other thing that we feel like we can't have dinner without? Bread. Think about all the places you go to. Bread is offered for free most of the time. You always get it as a side. Okay. Proteins are complex organic molecules that are chemically similar to lipids and carbohydrates because they contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms. Please understand what a protein is. Some good sources of protein. Okay, beef patty, such as a cheeseburger, right? Eggs, milk, grains, dried beans, peas, lentils, often overlooked as other sources of proteins. Okay, however, the proteins are the only macronutrient that contains nitrogen, the element cells need to make a wide variety of important biological compounds. Plants, animals, bacteria, and even viruses contain hundreds of proteins. Without proteins, much like fats for our cell membranes, phospholipids and cholesterol, without proteins we would not survive. We would not be able to recreate new blood cells, new tissue. Protein is an important class of nutrients, but is not more valuable than your health than other nutrients. They work together, so we need a good variety. Proteins in your body. Proteins are necessary for muscle development and maintenance, but there are more than 200,000 different proteins in your body. We'll learn them all this semester. I'm just kidding. I'm just going to see it.
Oh my God. I just ignored it.
See if you're paying attention. Proteins in the body, these are functions. The body uses proteins to make or function as new cells, hair and nails, enzymes, lubricants, clotting compounds, antibodies, literally every component of our body needs proteins. Certain hormones such as insulin and glucagon are proteins. Okay. Hormones and neurotransmitters are chemical messengers that regulate body processes and responses such as growth, metabolism, and hunger. Antibodies, infection-fighting antibodies are proteins. Okay, so we obviously need a good amount of proteins. We should not be. That's not our problem. I think the leaner cuts of proteins are a problem. In the bloodstream, proteins transport nutrients and oxygen. So if you do not have a good supply of proteins in your blood, your body will accumulate fluid. Okay? There's a couple ways to test this. Not near necessarily testing your protein, but if you use the back of your hand, it's called skin turgor. If you pinch it and it bounces back pretty good, then you're well hydrated. If you hold it up, okay, if you're able to pinch it and it stands, you're dehydrated. I'm sorry, if you pinch it and it stands, you're overhydrated. Okay, and if you're able to pull it up and it does not bounce back, then you are dehydrated. Okay, but you can also do that pitting. Whenever you have swelling and you press down on that swelling part, if it leaves an indentation, pretty good indication that you have swelling. That can be related to low proteins, but there could be some other issues going on as well. But those are some good signs that you probably need some more protein. Proteins help maintain the acid balance base. Metabolic processes can produce acidic or basic byproducts. If a particular body fluid becomes too acidic or too basic, cells can have difficulty functioning and may die. A buffer can help maintain that normal pH of solution. Proteins act as that buffer. Okay, so many good functions. Amino acids, Greg mentioned in the video that 8. There are 20 total. He was right about that. There are 20 total amino acids. I will only want you to know or be able to identify 9 of them vaguely. I'll explain that here in just a second. Each amino acid has a carbon atom that anchors a hydrogen atom. All a bunch of boring, non-useless information because we don't use that to make decisions on our food. So classifying these amino acids, a healthy human body can make 11 of them. Okay, these compounds are non-essential. The remaining 9 amino acids are essential because they must be supplied by foods. Okay, I just need you to know 9 essential. I need you to know that there are 9 essential. Not, I don't need you to know them. I just need you to know that there are 9 essential amino acids. Okay, Greg was confused. Maybe he's, I don't know. But there are 9, not 8. Okay, 20 total, 9 essential amino acids. Okay, moving on to 7.2, proteins in foods. Okay, we learned the difference between high quality protein, low quality protein, identify foods that are rich sources of high quality protein. 3 amino acids that are often limiting amino acids in plant foods. So this gives you a good idea. An ounce, typically an ounce of protein is 7 grams. Okay, 1 ounce is 7 grams. Here it shows, and it varies. This actually says 8, but it's on average it's 7. Despite the math here. Okay, just kind of give you an idea. Most of the time when we go out to eat, we don't get served ounces at a time. We get them in large servings. Protein quality. Before we get into that, I want you to know what legumes. They are plants that produce pods that have a single row of seeds, such as soybeans, peas, peanuts, lentils, and beans. Is salmon a legume? That's not very confident. Is salmon a legume?
No.
No, okay. Thank you. No, salmon is not a legume. Are peaches and apricots legumes?
Yes. No. Yes.
No.
No.
Single row of seeds. Single row of seeds. Okay, imagine when you go pick the apricots or the peaches off the tree.
Like green beans and peas.
Well, it doesn't. The green bean you eat, you don't peel the you don't take the pea out of the pod in a green bean. Okay, so the green bean would not be considered a legume, but soybeans, peas, peanuts, lentils. Oh, well, it says beans, but the beans, not a green bean, but the beans come in a pod. So you know what I mean? Okay. I agree. What?
What's special about them?
They do have protein, yes.
Okay.
Yep. Very good low-fat source of protein. Mature peas, lentils, and most kinds of beans contain more protein and complex carbohydrate than fat. Eating a 3-ounce serving of vegetarian, I don't know why would you call it a vegetarian baked beans? I guess you could add some meat to it, but then it wouldn't be very good. 3-ounce serving of baked beans adds about 4 grams of protein, 14 grams of carbohydrate, less than 1 gram of fat. Refried beans, hummus. I only use those. Hummus, I will use sometimes peanut butter. Sometimes I will use that as a condiment in my sandwiches, just to provide something different. Then I'm not using. I like mustard. Mayonnaise is not. I don't like that one. But anyway, foods foods differ not only in the amount of protein they contain, but also in their quality. High quality protein contains all essential. How many of them?
All.
Which is how many?
9.
9. Yeah, all 9 essential amino acids in amounts that support protein deposition in muscles and other tissues. High quality proteins are well digested and absorbed by the body. Meat, fish, poultry, eggs, and milk, and other dairy products contain high quality proteins. And so that's confusing, right? We were just talking about fats and how the fats, the egg yolks, are a high source of cholesterol, but then they're sitting here also telling us that it's a good quality protein. Again, I think it goes back to how much of that you're eating. I do not need you to know the low quality protein. Most foods are not sources of high quality proteins. Quinoa and soy protein are exemptions. How many of you ever tried quinoa? For those of you that haven't, why not? Never heard of it?
I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is exactly.
It's a grain. It's like a rice.
I think it's in the rice section,
Yep, you cook it just like you would. Takes a little bit longer.
Does it look like rice?
No, it looks like very small,
yeah. Caviar.
kind of caviar. You ever?
Wait, like the white little circles? Those
Yes.
are the
Yeah, fish
super
eggs.
rice?
Kind
I
of.
think I got that in my Hello Fresh the other day.
Probably.
And
it good?
we didn't end up cooking it because we both were like, nah.
You should try it.
Eat it.
It is good. I will tell you this. It does have a different flavor. But I think if you were to use it and add some flavors to it, I think the quinoa would absorb those flavors and it would taste better. I've used quinoa flour before. I was contracted to do some. It was a weight loss program. I was contracted to do some soups and whatnot, and I actually, out of the soup, we made broths. And so we would have a lot of vegetable matter left over, and I drained all the water out of it and ground up the vegetables and made egg noodles out of quinoa flour and the vegetable matter. It was pretty good. The quinoa, it was, and it's really quite easy, to be honest with you, other than the whole breaking down the vegetable matter process. The rest of it was pretty easy. It's about egg noodles. I mean, you imagine flour and eggs. That's all it is. Don't necessarily need you to know, like I said, don't need you to know the low quality protein. A child, regardless of how much protein is eaten, a child will fail to grow properly if his or her diet lacks essential amino acids. Okay. Vegetarians, let's talk about vegetarians. We're going to talk about a few different kinds of vegetarians, classifications rather, here, probably not today, but here in this chapter for sure. But we know that meats provide B vitamins. We'll get into that a little bit later this semester. So with that being said, if I'm a vegan, am I a higher risk for vitamin deficiencies?
Yes.
Which ones? The B's? Right? And maybe, because we need fats to absorb some vitamins, they could be deficient in other vitamins as well, because they're probably not getting very many fats from plant-based eating habits. The only thing out of 7.3 is, this kind of gives you an idea of the amino acids, what they look like. They're bonded with a peptide bond. I do want you to know what the peptide bond is. It is a chemical attraction between the acid group of one amino acid and the amino group of another amino acid. Genes. make up the DNA, the portion of the DNA that contains information. Okay, concerning the order of the amino acids that comprise of a specific protein. All of our antibodies are the mRNA is what is the original copy. Okay, if I was going to make a copy of test, I have an original copy. The mRNA would be that, and it goes out and makes other copies, and that's where we get our extra cells and stuff from. I'm not interested in protein synthesis. Diets that contain low quality protein may result in poor growth, slowed recovery from illness, and even death. Okay. How many of you ever tried, this is bone marrow. How many of you ever have eaten pork ossobuco? Have you ever heard of that? It's usually some type of a bone like this with the marrow in it. There's actually good quality. It's actually a delicacy. It doesn't taste anything different other than wherever that came from, usually beef or pork. Collagen, another, it's good for our joints. Okay, so anytime gelatin, when we talk about gelatin, that's where that comes from, bone marrow. Even the strawberry gelatin that you make at home, it either comes from pork or it comes from beef. Moving forward, sickle cell anemia. Does anybody know anyone that has sickle cell anemia? Okay, basically what happens is our red blood cells change shape in the form of a sickle. How many of you know what that was used for? They didn't teach you that in history?
What?
A sickle? It's not, okay, other than the Grim Reaper, it's for harvesting hay and stuff before tractors and stuff. They probably still use them sometimes, I guess, in the Amish. Denaturation, we've talked about that a little bit already. We know that denaturation, heat, okay, Adrian said that earlier. A couple other different ways. Basically, we're unfolding or uncoiling the shape of that protein by means of heat, which is the most common. We do use shear or force, beating egg whites before we fold those into meringues or cakes. We do that pretty often. When you cook an egg white, it becomes white and firm as its proteins become denatured. And that's also when they talk about the uncoiling and the reattaching. When you uncoil it, you have a lot more opportunities for those proteins to attach to something different, which is why egg is used a lot as a binding agent, because it will create that. Pepsin, already talked about that once before. Pepsin, an enzyme, helps digest proteins into smaller polypeptides. Just need you to know that it's an enzyme, breaks down proteins. Denaturation, so we talked about shear and heat. Acid, how many of you ever had like steak tartare or ceviche? It's raw, it's seafood cooked in acid, basically in lemon juice is what it is. Okay. So we can use acid to do that. We can make, I told you this, I think you can make mayonnaise just with an egg, olive oil, and vinegar. It's pretty, when you talk about egg, or we talk about binding things together, I think egg is probably a very common ingredient. So protein digestion and absorption, we know that pepsin breaks down those proteins. Okay, it starts in this, mouth, moves through the esophagus into the stomach where it starts to break down. We know that most vitamins and minerals are absorbed in which section of the intestines? The small intestines, very good. I'm not concerned about protein turnover, but deamination is the process of removing the nitrogen-containing group from unneeded amino acids. Okay, just know that term. As a result, deamination, the amino acid then gives up amino group, becomes a carbon skeleton. Pretty boring. Okay. Again, we don't really use these things to help us decide which foods we eat, but transamination occurs when nitrogen-containing group is transferred to another substance to make an amino acid. Transglutaminase, okay, comes from some of that because what we're doing is they were realigning those surface protein bonds, okay? nitrogen balance. This is important. Performing weight resistance training also leads to nitrogen retention. So muscle memory, working out your muscles helps with them. So basically, normally an adult's body maintains, adult's body, sorry guys. Okay, nitrogen balance. Although your body conserves nitrogen by recycling amino acids each day, you lose some protein and nitrogen from your body. Most of it's through urine. We also lose proteins in our urine as well. Our body can only process about 20 grams of protein per hour. So for those of you that go to the gym and you got some muscle head trying to push protein supplements on you, I would evaluate if that's necessary, because it becomes expensive at that point. Right? If I take a pre-workout with 20 grams, and then I'm working out for an hour, and then I take another post-workout drink, and it's got another 20 grams, that should extend for another hour, but instead I take this drink and then I probably go look for another source of protein for those that are trying to put on bulk. But eventually the body you will just urinate that protein, the excess protein out. So normally an adult's body maintains its protein content by maintaining that nitrogen balance, balancing nitrogen intake and protein turnover with losses. During certain stages of life, physical conditions, however, nitrogen intake and retention do not equal nitrogen losses. So when the body's in a positive nitrogen balance, it retains more nitrogen than it loses as proteins are added to various tissues. So positive balance would be better than a negative balance. Okay. EAR, we know that provides the needs for how many healthy individuals? It's two options, all or 50.
50.
50, very good, yeah. Protein, 0.66 grams of protein per kilogram of weight. They do that a lot. They take your weight and obviously convert it into kilograms, and they give us, that's pretty common, 0.8 grams per kilogram for most individuals. If they have kidney issues, which means they're not able to process the proteins very well, that can drop down to 4 or 5. If you have wounds and you need extra protein, or you're on dialysis, that can jump up to like 1.5 grams per kilogram as far as needs go. That's 7.3. I know this stuff isn't very, not very interesting, but help us push through it. Protein consumption patterns in 2017, 2018, 16% of adult Americans average energy intake per day. This level of consumption is within the AMDR, which is 10 to 35. Doing how much? What were the AMDRs for carbohydrates? Anybody remember? What percentage of calories were supposed to come from our carbohydrates?
60.
Good. 45 to 65 was the range. Does anybody remember fats?
13, 25.
Good, good. And we know that we're over that one. And this one is 10 to 35. I will not test you over those. But just kind of as a result, recent research, plant-based proteins, including proteins from grains, beans, legumes, peas, and nuts, supply only 20 to 30% of that. Okay, the rest of it's from these foods, which we already know that we eat a lot of that. So, look at this chart down here. Sources of meat, protein. Muscle tissue that people consume included unprocessed raw meats, fish, poultry. Well, no, he's going to eat unprocessed. Poultry that are usually cooked before eating. Okay, 2015-16 unprocessed poultry contributed to the largest share of adult Americans' total protein intake from meat. Unprocessed red meat, raw, it's dropped. Unprocessed poultry, so raw chicken, that's gone up. Fish is about to stay the same. Processed meat has not changed. What do we often associate meats with?
Protein.
Protein, and what other macronutrient? Yeah, fats. Remember the marbling on the steaks? Yep.
Are you you have to eat the fat with the steak?
Yes, I do.
I know, I can't, it's just,
But I don't do it very, I mean, I couldn't tell you last time, well, it was Tuesday, I had a sirloin. I had a sirloin Tuesday, which is a leaner cut of meat, right? But I mean, outside from that, I usually don't. I hunt, so I have game in my freezer that I use, leaner meats. I shop in bargains. I miss Ray Mead's back in West Plains because they had a 5 for $25, and usually on Sundays you can go in there and I can get 5 pounds or 10 pounds of hamburger meat for $25, which is about half the price of what we're paying for it now.
Hearts does that for 25.
They do? I'll have to go over there because I'm not going to Kroger.
Box 10 does something like that.
There was a box 10 up there. That place just makes me nervous.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some good deals, don't get me wrong. I mean, there are some good deals, but the meat section, like, is that even real? Just looking at it, it's just weird. Meat consumption and health, we know the saturated fat is associated with meats. Heart disease and cancer are the leading causes of death in developed countries, that includes us. Typically the Western diet, which is what we eat, high amounts of red or processed meat. So theoretically speaking, going back to hemoglobin, which is the easiest form of iron for our body to absorb, we find in red meats. We really shouldn't have a problem with anemia, which is low irons, but is there anybody in here that's anemic? Okay, do you eat red meats often, Flora?
No.
Okay, what about you, Abby?
I don't eat often, period, so probably not.
Okay. You can get iron from plants, leafy green vegetables. When we're eating those, we just need you to, some kind of citrus, vitamin C. Vitamin C will attach to the plant form of iron and your body will absorb it easier if you're not a big red meat eater. Okay?
Iron skillet too, right?
Yes, the old cast iron skillets, those naturally just release iron into the foods when you eat them. How many of you have a cast iron skillet? I do. Good. Well, I don't use it very often. It sits on my stove. I do it when I make, every once in a while I'll do some fried catfish or if I'm frying potatoes. Salmon? I bet it's good. I wish I could, without like triggering my smoke alarms, I wish I could do like a blackened kind of thing. Because those are really good to do that in. So yeah, cardiovascular disease, just because from the saturated fats that we eat, cardiovascular disease, which includes heart disease, hypertension, is associated with red meat and processed meat consumptions. If you're going to choose lunch meats, my suggestion is to go to the deli and get it cut from there, because the prepackaged stuff has nitrites in it, which are not good for your heart. The nitrites just help it sit there longer. It's not, if I had to give you another direction, I would say roast beef or corned beef are probably the two better choices. You can remove the fat from those things a little bit easier. But how many of you walk up to the deli and looked at the deli meats? Some of those nice, smooth little buffet hams that they slice the meat from, they don't get that from animals. They don't go, hey, go get that turkey breast so we can put it in the cooler out front. It doesn't come off that way. Okay, it's like a hot dog. They grind those things up and form that.
Did you hear that the price of chicken is about to go up because of this new avian chicken flu or whatever it is?
Oh, we've all,
I didn't say it, I just read it.
I'm just not even.
You set your sources.
Yeah, good one, Heather. What's your source? So recommendations for protein intake. How many of you ever heard of the Meatless Monday initiative, I guess you could say? Basically, we eat too much red meat, so Meatless Mondays are designed to offer alternate choices for one day of the week. If you can imagine however many days, we talk about the things that you do more than 50% of the time of the week. Those are the things you're going to have the most impact. So we know that we eat more red meat than we should, so probably choosing a vegetarian meal one day of the week could probably have some good outcomes. for us.
No.
No, he said, no. Outside of that, what do you guys think about that transglutaminase that in the video? Anybody, does that concern anybody? You just like, you know what, they're putting stuff in our food already, who cares?
Yeah, it's gonna happen.
I just try not to think about it when I eat. If it tastes good, it tastes good.
I'm just happy I ate anything this morning.
I'm happy for you, you guys are happy. Outside of that, I don't, be here next week. We will finish up chapter 7, we're a little bit ahead of schedule. I will show you the rest of this video come Monday. I know I showed it all to you.